The Millionaires Unit was comprised of Yale undergraduates who were tremendously forward-thinking in terms of them realizing that aviation could play a significant role in warfare. It's an inspiring history, and it's inspiring, I think, for the cadets to be able to trace their service all the way back to these pioneers in the early 20th century.
In 1917, the presidents of these various universities like Columbia and Harvard and Yale felt that this had to be, they were training the leaders, they had to take the leadership role, and they had been instructing or hoping to inculcate in their young men this sense of patriotism and leadership and devotion and sacrifice.
Some of these young men who formed the First Yale Unit or the Millionaires Unit went on to major leadership posts within the U.S. government. Its founder was Frederick Truthy Davison, known to one and all as Truthy. In 1916, was a sophomore at Yale College. He had been an ambulance driver in the previous summer, bringing the wounded back from the Western Front in France. And he learned about the role of aviation in the war at that point. All of them were among the first 100 naval aviators in United States history, except for one, and that was Truthy. Poor Truthy crashed during his flight examination, broke his back. He was partially disabled for the rest of his life. Truthy Davison's injury didn't hold him back. He continued to be close to all of the members of the First Yale Unit. In the years after the First World War, he became the president of the Museum of Natural History in New York and served in that role for 20 years. During World War II, he returned to the service despite his disabling injury. He became a brigadier general, the head of personnel for the Army Air Corps, and then after the war, he was the first director of personnel for the Central Intelligence Agency. Truthy Davison's brother, Henry, also known as Harry, was another member of the First Yale Unit. After the war, he became a banker and also the president of the Red Cross. Robert Lovett became one of the fastest rising officers in the U.S. Navy and ended up being the first American in uniform to fly a heavy bomber on a combat mission. Robert Lovett, at the start of World War II, became the Assistant Secretary of War for Air. In the post-war years, he was the Assistant Secretary of State. He helped to architect the Berlin airlift. He returned as the Secretary of Defense during the Korean War. He's considered one of the leaders in the rise of U.S. strategic air power during the Cold War. David Engels was one of the remarkable young men of the First Yale Unit. Engels was a Yale hockey player, a bit reckless. And he loved to fly, and he was a great pilot. During the First World War, he became the Navy's first and only air ace of the war, shooting down at least 5 enemy aircraft. After the war, he later became the Secretary of Navy for Air. And then during World War II, he returned to service. He was a Rear Admiral and became the commander of the Pearl Harbor Naval Air Station. They were in a very dangerous branch of the service where many young men died, and 3 of them gave their lives. Curtis Reed died in a crash while in France at Dunkirk. Kenneth McLeish was killed in aerial combat over Belgium, and Albert Sturtevant, captain of the Yale crew team, was the first American in uniform to die in air combat. He was killed while on patrol by German naval forces.
So this is the beginnings of U.S. naval aviation, and it's quite a story, and it leads all the way up to our being as we are today, by far the world's #1 carrier-based naval aviation power.